Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. A lone ex-federal inspector seeks peace in the mountains until a fake environmental order, a corrupt HOA, and a geothermal gold mine spark a quiet war. Lies, power, and land collide. He won't back down. They should have known. Some ground fights back. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the quiet cracked. Mountain mornings have a particular kind of silence, thick, deliberate, like the land is holding its breath. The lake below my porch was smooth enough to reflect the tree line without distortion, and steam curled off the mug in my hands as the sun pushed over the ridge. I had been living here long enough to tell time by the light, and nothing about that morning suggested trouble. No wind, no birds scattering, no distant engines climbing the service road. Then I heard tires. Not one vehicle, several. Slow, deliberate, confident. The kind of sound people make when they think they belong somewhere. I stood and looked down the gravel drive just as the first SUV came into view. Black, clean, expensive, with a white logo on the door that didn't belong in my world. Behind it, a white utility van with green lettering that read County Environmental Services, and behind that, a patrol car. Lights off, but very much present. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Anyone driving up here already knew exactly where they were going. The vehicles stopped in a neat line like they'd rehearsed it. Doors opened, shoes hit gravel. I counted people the way old habits die hard. One man in his early 60s stepping out of the SUV, posture stiff, chin lifted. Another man from the van, mid-30s, clipboard tucked under his arm, wearing a reflective vest that still had the creases from the packaging. Two police officers from the cruiser, one young enough that his duty belt looked too heavy for him, the other older and slower, already scanning the area. The man from the SUV didn't wait for introductions. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, voice carrying uphill. "Good morning." He knew my name. Of course he did. I took a sip of coffee before answering. "Morning," I said. "You're about 2 miles uphill from wherever you think you're supposed to be." He smiled the way people smile when they believe paperwork outranks land. Preston Gale, president of the Everpine Resort Homeowners Association. That explained the SUV. He gestured toward the man with the clipboard. "This is an environmental inspector from the county. We're here regarding a serious issue with your property." I finally stepped off the porch and walked down the short set of stairs, boots crunching against dirt and pine needles. I stopped several feet short of them, close enough to talk, far enough to make a point. "Interesting," I said, "because I didn't invite anyone." Preston's smile didn't move. "This isn't a social visit." The inspector cleared his throat and began reading from the clipboard, voice flat, rehearsed. He spoke about critical soil contamination, industrial chemical traces, a compound name that made my eyebrow lift on reflex. According to him, the land required immediate remediation, full evacuation for 20 days, access granted to contracted crews, a mandatory fee of $10,000 for initial treatment. As he spoke, Preston watched my face. I let him finish. Then I held out my hand. "I'll see the paperwork." The inspector hesitated just long enough to be noticeable, then passed over a stapled packet. The paper was warm from the sun and cheap enough that I could feel it through my fingers. I didn't rush. I read every line. Wrong logo, wrong formatting, wrong agency name entirely. There is no such thing as County Environmental Services in this state. There never has been. The chemical listed, trichloromethyl phosphate, doesn't exist. Not in soil, not in water, not anywhere outside a bad science fiction script. The seal at the bottom was a low-resolution scan, fuzzy at the edges, the kind you get when someone downloads an image and hopes no one looks closely. I looked up. "This is a joke," I said calmly. Preston's eyes tightened. "I assure you, it is not." I tapped the page. There is no county-level environmental authority in Colorado with jurisdiction over private land like this. Environmental enforcement is federal or state level only, EPA or CDPHE. You're neither. The inspector shifted his weight. "And that chemical you named," I continued, "isn't real. Whoever wrote this didn't bother to check." Preston stepped forward half a pace. "Mr. Blackwood, with all due respect, you are not an expert." "I spent 12 years as a federal environmental inspector," I said, cutting him off. "I signed real evacuation orders. I testified in court. I know exactly what those documents look like, and these aren't them." Silence dropped hard. The younger officer cleared his throat. "Sir," he said to me, "we were told there was a lawful order. You were given a forged document, I said, turning to him. And you are standing on private land that does not fall under the jurisdiction of that association. The older officer raised an eyebrow. Is that true? It is, I said. This parcel predates Everpine by decades. I'm not a member. Never have been. Preston's voice sharpened. He's refusing to comply. Officers, I'm requesting enforcement. He's been instructed to vacate. I looked at the young officer. He was sweating slightly under his hat. Officer, I said evenly, if you attempt to remove me based on this paperwork, you are participating in an unlawful eviction. I recommend you verify it before making a very expensive mistake. I pulled my phone from my pocket and read off a number from memory. Call the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Ask if they issued an order for my property. The older officer nodded slowly. Do it. The call took 3 minutes. I watched Preston's jaw set tighter with every second. When the officer hung up, his expression had changed. They have no record of any inspection, he said. No complaint, no contamination report. Preston opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. There must be some confusion. There isn't, the officer replied. We're not enforcing anything today. The inspector with the clipboard had already taken a step backward. Preston looked at me like I had personally offended him. This isn't over, I shrugged. It never is. They left in a hurry. No goodbyes, no explanations. Engines revved harder than necessary as they backed down the drive. When the dust settled, I realized I wasn't alone. A man stood near the tree line to my left, leaning on a weathered walking stick, hat pulled low. Late 60s, maybe older, ranger build, someone who belonged to the land more than the road. Morning, he said. Morning, I replied. Name's Roy, he said. Been watching this ridge longer than most people have been alive. I nodded. He looked down the drive where the vehicles had vanished. Don't like it when folks bring cops up here. Usually means trouble. Wasn't my idea. He studied me for a moment. Land smells clean, he said finally. But men don't come this far uphill without wanting something. I watched the lake again, steam rising where the sun touched it. That, I said, we can agree on. Roy nodded once and turned back toward the trees, leaving me alone with my coffee and the uneasy feeling that the silence had changed. By the time the sun dipped behind the ridge that evening, I'd scanned those fake documents 6 times, annotated every inconsistency in red ink, and filed digital copies to 3 cloud backups. Just in case someone decided to play dirty with a lighter or a magnet. I'd seen bureaucratic sabotage in my EPA days, the way bad actors erase paper trails when they realize they've underestimated their target. This wasn't my first rodeo, but it was starting to feel like the horses were rabid. I sat at the kitchen table, everything spread out like a crime scene, because that's what it was. The letterhead used on the order came from a long-defunct EPA memo template I hadn't seen since Bush was in office. The seal was lifted from a public PDF and printed on what felt like drugstore printer paper. There was even a typo in the agency name, Environmental instead of Environmental. It was insulting, really. So I did what any burned-out bureaucrat with a grudge and a grisly temperament would do. I picked up the phone and called Laura Chen. Laura had been a field investigator with the EPA before she took a promotion and started wrangling data integrity at the Denver office. Smart, ruthless, no tolerance for bullshit. We'd hunted down a fake remediation contractor together back in New Mexico. I trusted her. When she picked up, she skipped the pleasantries. Owen, why do I feel like this is going to ruin my night? Because it is, I said. I need you to check the complaint database. My parcel northeast of Everpine. Someone tried to serve me an evacuation order for toxic soil contamination. She made a noise like someone choking on bad wine. You kidding me? Do I sound like I'm kidding? She was already typing. Parcel ID. I rattled it off, then waited. A few seconds passed, then a low whistle. Yep, found something. Logged exactly 7 days ago. Anonymous complaint claiming illegal chemical dumping, unlicensed storage containers, and groundwater endangerment. Status: flagged for review, but rejected the same day. No inspection scheduled, no site visit logged, not even a phone call. Whoever submitted it didn't even attach supporting evidence. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling like maybe the beams had answers. Can you see the origin? I asked. IP? Silence for a beat. Technically, no. But unofficially? That's what I'm asking, Laura. She sighed. IP address traces to a business connection registered under Gale Construction, Everpines Community Development Office. That's your HOA president's company, right? Ding, 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 I said. Preston Gale himself. She cursed under her breath. What the hell is this guy trying to pull? He's trying to force me off my land. There's a hot spring here. He wants it for a spa. Laura laughed, bitter and low. You ever think about writing a book? Every damn day. I thanked her, hung up, and added that data to the growing file I'd titled War Crimes Against Common Sense. That night, I installed a second set of motion sensor cameras at the back edge of my property, one facing the old service trail, the other toward the access slope near the ridge. I wasn't just worried about paper threats anymore. Preston had failed at the front door, which meant next time he might come crawling through a window. Turns out, I didn't have to wait long for the next move. At 10 the next morning, I headed to the general store down in Miners Hollow to pick up a package, water filters, some freeze-dried meals, a replacement part for my generator, nothing fancy. The woman at the counter, Jean, gave me a polite smile, then handed over a large envelope with my name on it. No return address, no postage. Inside was a fresh copy of the same fake environmental order, but this time someone had scrawled in red ink, "Final notice. Failure to comply will result in legal action." Subtle. Back at the cabin, I opened my gate to find my private property sign had been split in half, like someone had kicked it. Not torn off. No, that would have taken commitment. Just broken enough to rattle the message. I took photos, logged the time, uploaded it all. Then I stared at the woods for a long time. He was escalating. Sloppy intimidation, fake bureaucracy, now property damage, and anonymous threats. A trifecta of cowardice. I grabbed my thermos, filled it with what was left of the morning's coffee, and walked the perimeter. About halfway through, I spotted someone standing near the creek on the eastern boundary, tall, in a ranger's jacket. Roy. He turned when he saw me, lifted a hand in greeting. "Wasn't sure if I'd find you out here," he said. "Walk this loop every day," I replied, thinking about putting in a trap door and dropping in on trespassers. He gave me a dry chuckle. "Heard about the environmental order. Word travels. Word's wrong. It's fake." Roy nodded slowly, chewing the inside of his cheek. "I don't like Gale much," he said eventually, "but the man doesn't usually come this far out of pocket." I looked him square in the eye. "This isn't a warning. This is theft. Just dressed up in legal stationery." "Could be." He shifted his weight. "But you gotta admit, you show up out of nowhere, buy a cabin on untouched land, refuse to join the HOA, and then suddenly a hot spring pops up under your porch? Most folks around here like things uncomplicated." "I didn't dig the damn spring," I said. "It was here, always has been." "I know," Roy said. "I was just saying, you got eyes on you now." He turned to go, then paused. "Be careful, Blackwood. Men like Gale don't like losing." "Neither do I wanted to say, but instead, I just watched him disappear into the trees while the wind picked up and rattled the broken sign like bones on a string. 2 days later, the noise returned. Not tires this time. Engines. Loud ones. Commercial, diesel-throated, and unapologetically arrogant. I heard them before I saw them, bouncing up the switchbacks like they owned the place. That same polished SUV in the lead, followed by a flatbed truck hauling a portable containment trailer, hoses coiled like entrails on its side. A second van trailed them, this one labeled Hazmat Response Services, LLC. I was already on the porch, mug in hand, shotgun not in hand but very visible behind the door. It's a legal state, and I was done being polite. The truck stopped just shy of the clearing. The containment trailer hissed a mechanical sigh as it lowered stabilizers. 4 guys in hazmat suits began unloading gear without a single glance toward the house. Preston Gale stepped out of the SUV like he was arriving for a tea time. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," he called, too loud, too friendly. "We're here to begin preliminary soil extraction, standard procedure. Shouldn't take more than a few days." I didn't answer, just sipped my coffee, let the silence soak into his confidence. He walked closer, stopping at the edge of my gravel loop. "I assume you've had time to reconsider our proposal, and I appreciate you not calling the police again." "I didn't say I wouldn't," I said. He smiled. "No need for escalation." I set the mug down on the railing. "What you're doing is called trespassing." "And what those men are doing," I nodded toward the hazmat crew unloading equipment onto my property. "That's criminal trespassing with intent to tamper." Preston raised both hands as if trying to de-escalate a hostage situation. "They have a work order. "You have another fake document, Preston. That doesn't make it a work order. It makes it evidence." He didn't like that. The smirk twitched into something meaner. Then he looked over my shoulder and said, "Gentlemen, please proceed. We're not here to argue. We're here to protect the environment." One of the hazmat guys fired up a portable soil auger, the kind you use when you actually plan to disturb the earth. I stepped off the porch and walked across the clearing fast and direct. The lead crewman barely turned before I was on him. "You have authorization for this?" I asked, projecting loud enough for every recorder I had running. "You have a signed warrant, state clearance, anything from EPA or CDPHE?" He froze like a dog mid-theft. Then another voice cut through the morning. "Is there a problem here?" It was Roy. He stood near the edge of the trees, his own truck just behind him, parked off the trail. His ranger jacket was zipped halfway, hand resting on his hip like it always did when he was deciding whether to believe what he was seeing. Preston turned to him, instantly shifting tone. "Mr. Morgan, always a pleasure. Just a routine ecological remediation." Roy walked closer, not fast, not slow, just steady, measured. "This land's not part of Everpine," he said. "Technically correct," Preston replied. "But the contamination may impact the shared watershed, which justifies precautionary intervention." Roy looked at me, then at the hazmat crew. "You got that in writing?" Preston stepped back, gestured toward the van. "All the documentation is in the field packet," I answered for him. "Field packet's forged." Roy walked to the open trailer, picked up one of the plastic binders, flipped it open. I saw his brow crease. He turned a few pages, snorted. "This signature here," he said, pointing, "belongs to a guy I know, retired 2 years ago. And this seal? It's from a floodplain report. Has nothing to do with soil quality." Preston's face pinched tighter than a compression valve. Roy looked back at him. "You're trying to run a private hazmat op on someone else's land, without lawful cause, and now it smells like conspiracy." Preston's charm cracked. "You're not law enforcement, Roy." "No," Roy said. "But I know every ranger, every EPA contact in this county, and more than a few deputies. You want this to go formal?" I stepped in. "I already called the sheriff's office. They'll be here in 20. The hazmat crew stopped moving. Tools down." No one wanted to be on the wrong end of a lawsuit. Preston looked like he'd swallowed battery acid. "You're escalating this," he said. "You know that, right?" "No," I replied. "You escalated it. I'm just documenting the climb." He stormed back to the SUV, barking something into his phone. The crew started packing up without a word. In less than 10 minutes, the convoy turned around and rolled back downhill, leaving muddy tire marks and silence. Roy stayed behind, hands in his pockets. "You think he's done?" I asked. Roy shook his head. "Men like that don't stop. They adapt." He bent down, picked up one of the dropped binders, and handed it to me. "You should go see the folks at the town office," he said. "Word is there's been talk about rezoning up here. Might be worth finding out who's whispering what." As he turned to go, I said, "Why'd you help?" He didn't stop walking, just called over his shoulder. "Didn't do it for you, Blackwood. Did it for the creek. It doesn't have anyone else to speak for it." That night, I read the local paper over a bourbon. Page 3. Potential hazards at Blackwood Spring. Environmental concerns raised at high-altitude parcel. There was a stock photo of a hazmat crew, not even mine, next to the article. The story quoted unnamed sources. Talked about persistent rumors. Said a community leader was pushing for emergency intervention if contamination wasn't addressed. I folded the paper, set it down, and poured another drink. He wasn't giving up. He was changing tactics. Time to do the same. I woke up the next morning with a hangover, not from the bourbon, but from the stench of staged propaganda. That article had done more than just stink up the local newsstand. I checked the town Facebook group, a digital swamp of passive-aggressive boomers and HOA warriors. The post had blown up, 178 comments and counting, half of them accusing me of poisoning the mountain. The other half were conspiracy theories about government cover-ups, ancient uranium mines, and Big Spring water trying to buy me out. Only one comment mattered. Should have joined the HOA. Then maybe he wouldn't have anything to hide. Time to stop playing defense. I called Tom Reynolds. We'd worked together once during a joint federal-state sweep of a mining fraud ring near Idaho Springs. He used to be DEA, then private, then burned out. Now he called himself a consultant in asset exposure, which was a polite way of saying he knew how to dig up dirt and wasn't afraid to roll in it. He answered on the second ring. "If this is about a dead deer carcass in a hot spring, I had nothing to do with it. Still charming, I see. Owen, you son of a bitch. What's up? I've got a rich developer with forged environmental orders, fake hazmat crews, and a hard-on for geothermal real estate. I need you to dig. There was a pause. I'm listening. By evening, Tom already had results. Knew the name Gale rang a bell, he said, voice grainy over speakerphone. Preston Gale, president of Gale Construction. On paper, he's worth about $4 million. Off paper, I'd say he's 2 months away from defaulting on half his loans. His resort's bleeding money. Investors are pissed. Any recent permits? 4 months ago, he applied for a commercial development variance. Wanted to build a full-service spa complex. Indoor-outdoor pools, cabins, the works. Was denied. Reason: no access to a geothermal water source. I stared out at the steam curling off my spring. Well, I said, isn't that just tragic? There's more. Remember that name? Evelyn Caldwell? Vaguely. Widow. Used to own a patch near the ridge? Yup, sold it under duress last year. Claimed her well water had benzene anomalies. Suddenly, she gets a visit from environmental agents with clipboards and warnings. Within a month, she sells for half market value. And guess what? Gale builds a parking structure there 6 weeks later. My stomach turned. Did you confirm the agents? Confirmed they weren't agents. One was a part-time security guard. The other was his nephew. I closed the laptop slowly, like shutting a lid on a snake. I needed a witness. So I drove. 2 towns over. Evelyn Caldwell still lived in the county. Small cottage near a Baptist church, garden like a jungle. She didn't answer the door right away. When she did, she peered out like I was selling Apocalypse subscriptions. "You're the hot spring guy," she said. Not what I usually go by, but yes. She let me in without asking why I was there. Her living room smelled like lavender and cinnamon, and every flat surface held some kind of knitted thing. Blankets, scarves, animals with button eyes. "I got scared," she said before I could ask. "They said chemicals. That I'd be liable if someone got sick. That the land was toxic, and it would cost more to fix it than to sell." She poured tea without offering, just handed it to me. And then, they stopped coming after I signed. Never got a report. Never got a copy of anything I signed except the sale contract. I asked for tests. Never saw one. Just hand-waving and pressure. I nodded. She went to a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, photos of the men who came. Cell phone shots. One had a name tag that read, "R. Mendez Environmental Control." Tom would love it. "Thank you," I said. "Would you be willing to give a statement?" She looked at me, long and slow. "They made me feel like I was crazy," she said. "No one believed me. Not the board, not the lawyer, not even my sister. So if you're asking if I want someone else to feel what I felt," she smiled. "It wasn't nice. I'd be thrilled to make a statement." Back at the cabin, I cataloged everything. Photos, transcripts, IP data, the faked orders, the act from Preston's hazmat pantomime. I sent it all to a secure drive. Labeled it Gale Con Malice. The cherry on top came just past sunset when a knock rattled my front door. I opened it, expecting another threat. Maybe someone with a clipboard and a flashlight. It was Roy. He looked tired. Like he hadn't slept well. Or maybe he was just done pretending neutrality. "Heard you didn't sell," he said, looking past me at the porch, the steam rising off the waterline. "I didn't," I said. "Why?" "Because the paper said you did. Town Hall's been whispering about it. The HOA filed a draft of a property reassignment request. Some real official-sounding bullshit." I blinked. They're trying to fake a sale? Or make it look inevitable? Psychological squeeze. Get you to cave. I walked out onto the porch and handed him the folder Evelyn gave me. He flipped through it slowly. Photo. Badge. Statement. Fake names. Gaslighting. Fraud. When he looked up, his eyes weren't tired anymore. They were angry. "Ah, son of a bitch," he said. "Welcome to the party," I said. Roy exhaled and sat down on the porch bench like he'd just made a decision no one could unmake. "I know some folks at the DA's office," he said, "back when I was still official. They don't like being made fools of." "Good," I said, "because I think it's time to stop playing whack-a-mole and start setting traps." We sat there for a while, watching the mist rise like breath from the mountain. That was the night I stopped being a target and started being a problem. 3 days later, I made the call. Preston picked up on the second ring. I could almost hear the smugness before he even spoke. "Mr. Blackwood, have you reconsidered our offer?" I let just enough hesitation bleed into my voice. I might have, if certain conditions are met. There was a pause, subtle but full of calculation. I'm listening. I turned toward the window, watching the thin steam ribbon from the hot spring and swirl into the cold morning air. You get rid of the contamination claim, quietly. No more hazmat trucks, no more surprise visits, no more community gossip. You pull the heat off my back, and maybe, just maybe, I'll consider a private arrangement for the land. Off-market, clean. Preston exhaled like he was trying not to gloat. That's very reasonable, Owen. We just want to help you. Why don't we meet? Talk in person. No pressure, no paperwork unless you want it. I don't want to meet in town, I said. Too many eyes. Of course, he said. Your cabin then? Saturday. Say 3 o'clock. Works for me. I hung up before the smugness could rot the phone line. The bait was in the water. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Roy and Tom going over the plan like it was a military op. Tom had brought equipment, voice recorders, pinhole cameras, a backup mic on the porch light, even a GPS tracker in case someone accidentally took my laptop on the way out. Roy had already spoken to an assistant DA named Cantu. She was young, sharp, and furious the second she saw the documents. They were willing to act, but they needed something undeniable. Not paper, not speculation, a confession. You sure he's dumb enough to say it out loud? Roy asked. Tom smiled. Desperation makes smart people stupid, especially rich ones. So we rigged the cabin, camera in the coat rack, audio in the lamp base, a second recorder on a timer inside the kitchen clock. All of it patched to a laptop with real-time sync. Tom would be in the shed, Roy in the ranger station down the ridge with Cantu listening in. I'd be the bait. Again. Saturday came cold and bright. I cleaned the place just enough to look presentable. Table cleared, coffee on, no signs of surveillance except for the strategically stacked books on environmental fraud and a framed copy of my old EPA badge near the desk. Subtle intimidation. 3 o'clock sharp, I heard tires on gravel. Not the usual SUV, this one was sleeker. A leased black Lexus with resort plates. He came alone. Wore a vest like he was headed to brunch. Smile already cocked. Sunglasses he didn't take off until I opened the door. Mr. Gale, I said. Mr. Blackwood. He stepped in like he'd already bought the place. We sat. I poured him coffee. He took one sip, then winced. Still drinking that EPA sludge, I smiled. Keeps the senses sharp. He got down to business fast. We're prepared to offer $1.3 million, clean sale, NDA included. You walk away. We handle the remediation quietly and no one needs to know anything ever happened. No cleanup needed though, right? I said casually. I mean, it's not really contaminated. He paused, then chuckled like we were two CEOs sharing a cigar. Of course not, he said. It's all just theater. You know how these things go. I tilted my head. So the inspection, the hazmat team, the soil tests, all smoke, pressure, negotiating tactics. It got your attention, didn't it? I nodded slowly. And the inspector? He laughed. Actor from Denver, $800 and a fake badge. Honestly, I thought you'd catch on sooner. I let that hang. Then I leaned forward. And what about Evelyn Caldwell? His smile faltered for the briefest moment. Ancient history, he said. She was in over her head. We helped her. By threatening her, he shrugged. We motivated her. She was sitting on wasted land. Now it's valuable. Win-win. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my jaw, but I kept my voice level. And you used HOA funds to finance all this. He sipped his coffee again. Some of it. The board didn't ask too many questions. They wanted results. Besides, we'll make it all back in the first year once the spa is up and running. That was it. Every word caught by 4 recorders and a line directly to the DA. I stood up, walked to the door. Well, Preston, you've made yourself very clear. He stood, brushing imaginary lint from his vest. So we have a deal. I opened the door. Not exactly. Tom stepped out from the shed, shotgun in hand but pointed down. Roy walked up from the trees behind the porch, holding a radio. Preston blinked. What is this? Roy spoke into the mic. D.A. Cantu, are you ready? A voice crackled over the radio. Loud and clear, bring him in. Tom nodded. Congratulations, Preston. You've just confessed to fraud, conspiracy, and misappropriation of funds. On tape, multiple times. Have a seat. Preston turned red so fast I thought he might stroke out. You entrapped. This won't hold up. Roy stepped forward. Son, we didn't trap you. We just gave you a stage. You delivered the monologue. I almost felt bad. Almost. He tried to walk past me, but I blocked the door. You're not leaving in your Lexus, I said. Sheriff's already on his way. Might want to practice your no comment. He stared at me, then at Roy, then at Tom, like he still thought there was a card left to play. But the game was over. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up 20 minutes later, lights flashing against the trees like a slow-rolling forest fire. 2 deputies stepped out, both of them stone-faced. One of them was young, same kid from the first encounter. He wouldn't look me in the eye. The other was Sheriff Dale Hatchett himself, grizzled, slow-moving, with a voice like creaking barnwood, and the posture of a man who had seen too much paperwork and not enough justice. He stepped out of the car, looked at Preston, still standing on my porch like a glitch in a simulation, and sighed. "Well, hell," Dale said. "I was hoping I wouldn't see you up here again, Mr. Gale." Preston snapped. "You don't have jurisdiction to detain me. This is entrapment, and I want my lawyer, immediately." Dale scratched his beard. "You'll get one. But first, I'm going to read you something." He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. I recognized the DA's letterhead immediately. "Preston Gale, you are under arrest for multiple counts, including fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit environmental interference, attempted unlawful eviction, and misappropriation of HOA funds. You have the right to remain silent." Preston stepped forward, hands up, defiant. "You can't do this. I'm on the board. I've contributed millions to this county." "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law," Dale continued without breaking stride. "You have the right to an attorney." Preston lunged. Not a punch. Not really. More like a last-ditch shove. But Roy moved faster than any retiree had a right to. He intercepted him mid-step, arm across the chest like a fallen log, and pressed Preston back against the cabin wall with enough force to knock the breath out of him. "Now that," Roy said, "was dumb." The younger deputy stepped in and cuffed him. No resistance this time, just heavy breathing, fast and sharp. Preston looked at me one last time, eyes wild, desperate. "This isn't over." "Oh," I said, "I think it is." The sheriff and his team loaded Preston into the cruiser. Tom and I handed over the evidence drives, labeled, time-stamped, cataloged. Roy provided a sworn statement on the spot. Cantu said they'd start with formal charges Monday morning. In the meantime, Preston would be spending the weekend in a holding cell with peeling paint and a toilet that never stopped running. But the real satisfaction came the next day when they searched his office. Tom got a call from one of his former ATF buddies who worked with the county investigators. They found everything. A storage bin full of fake documents, printouts of the phony inspection forms, unused letterhead templates, even props from the hazmat op, including the exact same vest worn by the Denver actor, emails detailing the staged harassment of Evelyn Caldwell, financial records showing that over $120,000 from the HOA's reserve fund had been funneled into contractor services under fake LLC names, all traceable to Gale Construction. The hammer was coming down. Hard. And the icing. They found communications between Preston and 2 members of the Everpine HOA board discussing how to neutralize community resistance to the spa project. One of them even joked in an email, "If Blackwood doesn't sell, maybe his cabin will mysteriously burn down." Cute. Now it wasn't just fraud, it was conspiracy, intimidation, and potential racketeering. I wasn't smiling. Not yet. But I did allow myself a long, slow breath, the kind that fills your lungs the way justice fills a vacuum. That night, I heard tires again, a single pickup, slow and cautious. Roy. He stepped out holding a six-pack and a look that said it ain't over yet, but it's damn close. "DA wants you in court next week," he said. "They're going for a full public hearing. Open session. Press will be there." I raised an eyebrow. "You coming?" He cracked open a bottle and handed it to me. "Hell yeah. Wouldn't miss it for the world." We sat on the porch for a while, not talking, just watching the hot spring breathe out steam in rhythmic pulses like the mountain itself was alive and exhaling. "Funny thing," Roy said, eyes still on the trees, "about men like Gale. They think a pretty view gives them divine right. But the land doesn't care about money. It just waits. And when the wrong man tries to own it, it fights back," I said. He nodded. "With the right help." I clinked my bottle against his. See you in court." The courtroom smelled like old paper, floor wax, and stale anger. It was one of those no-frills municipal rooms built sometime in the 60s. Paneled walls, hard wooden pews, acoustics that turned every cough into a cannon blast. But on that Monday morning, it felt like the center of the goddamn universe. Every seat was filled. Locals, HOA members, reporters with badges on lanyards. I even spotted Jean from the general store. She gave me a thumbs up like I was walking into a wrestling match. And, in a way, I was. Preston sat at the defense table in a suit at least one size too tight. His lawyer, gray-haired, slick, probably charged by the syllable, whispered something into his ear every 5 minutes. Preston just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, hands folded like a naughty schoolboy trying to fake innocence. The judge was an older woman with sharp eyes and a voice like she could castrate a grizzly with 2 words. Honorable Judge Morales. I liked her immediately. She began with a summary of the charges: fraud, forgery, criminal trespass, attempted unlawful eviction, misappropriation of funds, conspiracy, and, my personal favorite, reckless endangerment via falsified environmental claims. Then came the witness testimonies. They started with Roy. He was calm, concise, and devastating. Described every fake document he reviewed, the irregularities in the supposed inspection, the confrontation on my property. He even brought a printed copy of the hazmat contractor's invoice showing a billing address that traced back to a UPS box leased by Gale Construction. Then came Evelyn Caldwell. She walked slowly to the stand but spoke with fire. Her voice cracked when she described the fear, the pressure, the way they made her believe her land was toxic. She read out loud one of the letters she received, a threatening mess of legalese that claimed her water could kill children. I saw 2 jurors physically recoil. And then it was my turn. I sat straight, hands visible, voice steady. I detailed everything. The morning of the fake inspection, the inspector's bizarre terminology, the fake badge, the way Preston threatened me with police removal, the broken sign, the anonymous letters, the hazmat team, the bribe, and finally, the confession at my cabin, recorded on 4 devices, synced, verified, and replayed for the courtroom in full clarity. I watched Preston's lawyer flinch halfway through the playback. After I stepped down, the prosecution rested. Short, brutal, surgical. Then it was Preston's turn to speak. He didn't take the stand. Of course not. But his lawyer tried. He blamed miscommunication, overzealous third-party contractors, a regrettable lapse in oversight, claimed Preston never intended to deceive, that he simply acted in good faith, under the mistaken belief that environmental hazards were present. The courtroom laughed. Actually laughed. Judge Morales slammed her gavel once. "You think this is a joke, Mr. Gale?" Preston didn't answer. His lawyer had one last card, attempted character defense. Brought in an HOA board member to testify that Preston had always acted with the community's best interests in mind. Then the prosecution handed the witness copies of the emails suggesting my cabin might accidentally catch fire. The defense rested faster than a tipped cow. After closing statements, the judge called for a recess. It lasted 27 minutes. When we returned, she didn't waste words. The evidence presented to this court is overwhelming and disturbing. Not only was there premeditation, but there was also a sustained pattern of deceit, intimidation, and manipulation of both individuals and institutions. This was not a mistake. It was a calculated operation for personal gain. She sentenced Preston Gale to 7 years in state prison, with 5 years mandatory, fines totaling over $250,000, not including pending civil suits, court costs, restitution, and mandatory ethical review of Gale Construction's licensing. She then ordered a criminal investigation into the Everpine HOA board and announced that an independent trustee would assume temporary control of the HOA's assets pending review. Preston didn't speak. He just sat there, pale and twitching, as bailiffs led him away. One camera flashed as he passed through the doors. Somewhere out there, his mugshot would be on every local news site by dinner. As I left the courthouse, Roy met me on the steps. "Ever feel like you just stepped out of a movie?" he asked. "Only if it's one where the good guy spends most of the runtime pissed off and covered in dirt." He handed me a folded copy of the day's paper. Front page headline, "HOA President Found Guilty in Land Fraud Scheme." Below it, a photo of me standing beside the hot spring, arms crossed, looking slightly more competent than I felt. "Press got your good side," Roy said. I looked down at the photo, then out at the parking lot, where I saw Evelyn talking to a reporter and smiling. Maybe for once the land had spoken through us, and someone had actually listened. Winter came late that year. By December, the first snow had powdered the treetops like sifted sugar, but the ground remained warm near the spring. Steam still rose every morning, ghost-like and steady, just the way it had for centuries before men like Preston ever showed up thinking they could own it. The cabin was quiet now. Finally. No engines grinding up the road. No strangers with clipboards. No cameras poking from tree lines. Just wind, pines, and the occasional elk wandering close enough to sniff the deck. Roy stopped by every few days, sometimes with firewood, sometimes with beer, sometimes with nothing at all, except a silence that sat between us like old friends who'd fought a war and didn't need to say much afterward. One morning, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check from the county, $35,000. Restitution for hardship and legal expenses, it said in government speak. Well, I muttered, that should just about cover the bourbon. The town changed too. Evelyn Caldwell got her land back, thanks to a successful civil suit. She refused to sell it again, but she did open it up for public trail access, her way of telling the mountain she was sorry for doubting it. The Everpine HOA was gutted, their board dissolved under court order, a third-party trustee was installed, and suddenly complaints about grass height and mailbox paint didn't seem quite so urgent anymore. Preston Gale filed an appeal. He lost. Then filed again. He lost harder. Last I heard, his wife divorced him, his company was in receivership, and someone in prison broke his nose over a chess game. Poetic, really. As for me, I finished the book. Chapter 12 was titled, How to Spot a Fake Environmental Inspector in 30 Seconds or Less. The dedication read simply, to those who protect the land, not exploit it. Laura from the EPA came out for a long weekend. I built a new bench near the spring, just for her. We soaked our feet in the water, watched the stars, drank cheap whiskey, and laughed about the idiocy of bureaucracy. Before she left, she pointed at the wooden sign I'd posted by the trailhead. Private property, clean land, verified by actual EPA. She raised a brow. Modest, I shrugged. Subtleties overrated. And with that, I stepped back into my quiet life, where the loudest sound was wind in the trees and the occasional elk farting near the porch. Exactly how I like it.